Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'd like to recognize some of the other leaders who are here with me. Let me start with co-anniversary partner, our great city treasurer, Melissa Conyers-Irvins. Melissa, why don't you stand up and let us recognize you. Chicago Department of Planning and Development Commissioner Maurice Cox. Local Initiatives Support Corporation Executive Director Megan Hart. It's a great day to be here. 2 years ago, I became mayor of the greatest city on the planet. And I came into office with the ambitious goal of rooting for the values of equity, diversity, inclusion, transparency, accountability, and transformation, and making sure that those values ran deep in our city, not just our city government, but our entire city, as well as to deliver the transformative change our residents have been asking for, but been deprived of for far too long. On the campaign trail, I listened to countless residents, learned about their vision for Chicago, and asked how I could help to make their vision a reality. More often than not, what they wanted was pretty simple. The ability to pay their bills, put food on the table, and still have money left over at the end of the month. They just wanted to live their lives in peace and have access to good paying, sustainable jobs and ample opportunity for upward mobility so they could pass on wealth to their children. And above all, to have a city government that actively works to eradicate the systemic inequities that have plagued the city of Chicago for far too long, which includes things like poverty, racism, disinvestment, healthcare gaps, and more. And working to turn these visions into realities has not been an easy task over the last 2 years. And of course, we all know there's much more work to do. And there have been countless challenges that have come up along the way and have complicated the process, not the least of which was a global pandemic, civic unrest, economic meltdown, and far many other things, particularly in the last year alone. But even in the face of adversity, we've been able to come together as a city and rise to the occasion. And when I say we, I don't talk just about my administration. I talk about the larger we, the residents of the great city of Chicago. Our city departments and sister agencies, our community organizations, our healthcare providers and faith leaders, and the countless other individuals and organizations that have taken a stand against these systemic inequities and have been invaluable partners in our efforts to eradicate them once and for all. Thanks to the collaboration and the authentic partnerships that we continue to build, we've been able to make significant progress in lifting the burden of government off the backs of our residents, which has a painful history of perpetuating inequality, as well as give our residents what they need in order to thrive. And we need to do more as we look to the third and fourth years of our respective terms and coming out of this pandemic. Our residents have asked us to invest in their neighborhoods, and we delivered by creating Invest Southwest, our signature neighborhood investment program that has deployed already over $70 million across 10 of our neighborhoods on the south and the west side to catalyze, get this folks, over $300 million in additional investments from the private sector already. Our residents ask us to feel safe in their neighborhoods, and we have been delivering by creating a 3-year public-facing violence prevention plan to make Chicago the safest big city in the country, and have made unprecedented multi-million-dollar investments in street outreach initiatives, youth programming, mental health services, and trauma supports. Our residents ask to be free of the cycles of poverty and debt that weigh them down every day, that rob them of their ability for upward mobility. And we delivered by reforming harmful and predatory fines and fees practices, creating initiatives like Fresh Start, which allows former City College students to clear their debt, return to college, and finish their degree, and a utility billing relief program, which cuts water and sewer bills in half for working families and forgives any owed debt. We passed legislation that prevents renters from being kicked out of their homes before they are able to find a new place to live, increasing the supply of affordable housing. And this July 1st, we will raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Now, as I said earlier, these accomplishments are no but means an indicator that our work is over. There's much more work to do on every single issue that our residents are hungry for. This 2-year anniversary of my administration instead provides us with an important opportunity to acknowledge how far we've come, chart out our path forward, and continue to reimagine a better future for everyone in every neighborhood in our city. And that's why I am thrilled to be here today to kick off the Chicago Works Community Challenge, our city's newest community investment initiative that will help improve neighborhoods and beautify them. The Chicago Works Community Challenge will leverage $10 million or one award of up to $1.5 million to each of our seven planning districts to make enhancements to public facilities such as a park, a public school, library, or a residentially zoned, city-owned vacant lot. The challenge is also part of our 5-year, multi-billion-dollar, first-of-its-kind capital plan called Chicago Works, which enables us to improve the quality of life for all of our residents through investments in the critical public infrastructure that we each rely upon every day. Investments and developments on this scale, however, do not happen in a vacuum, meaning that in order for the investment and development initiatives to have the most positive impact on community, it must be reflective of what the community wants. That's why community input will play a huge role in the Chicago Works Community Challenges site selection process, as well as throughout the review process, where community projects will be evaluated for feasibility, community prioritization, design, and impact. Applications will go live on June 1st and be open till September 1st. Finalists will be chosen by December 1st. And we will aim to break ground and begin construction on the final projects as soon as possible in 2022. Now, I encourage any and all the residents to take part in this challenge, which intentionally makes neighborhood investment a collaborative process. Because at the end of the day, I know that you know what your community needs best. As I've traveled all across this vast city over these last 2 years, I've talked to residents who have asked for more. Sometimes it's small things, sometimes it's bigger things. But what we want to do is catalyze that desire, bring community together in a process, and then put money behind it to make sure that these community-driven initiatives become real. I want to tell you about that vacant lot that you wish could be, I want you to tell us about that vacant lot that you wish could be turned into a playground or a community garden. Your local park or school that could use better facilities, or your local library that might be missing a community room or some other feature. Since day one of my administration, listening to the needs of our residents has been and will continue to be my top priority. We've seen what happens when community members, especially those who are black or brown or low income, are left out of the conversation. We know what happens then. Disinvestment deepens, racial and healthcare gaps widen, and any progress that was made gets stymied. When we don't root the values of equity and inclusion within everything that our government does, we all are the poorer for it. 2 years ago, I assumed office, and it made my mission to inject equity and inclusion in everything that we do. Doing so means doing the people's work every day. And now, 2 years later, I can say that I'm proud of the progress that we've made and excited to continue the hard work, to roll up our sleeves and get things done on behalf of the residents of this city who are clamoring for a city government and a mayor and a city that respects them, that reflects their lived experience and what we do. So, on behalf of my entire administration, I want to thank all of our partners at the city, community, philanthropic, and business institutions for joining us on this journey of reimagining Chicago and making it work for those who need it most. And though we may only be at the halfway mark, together we should be proud of what we have already accomplished and reinforce Chicago's place as the best big city in the country. In the days and weeks and months ahead, I'm not only looking forward to bringing our new Chicago Works Community Challenge to life, but also working that much harder every single day to give our residents the tools that they need to not just survive, that's not good enough, but to thrive, to bring vibrant, exciting life back to their communities so that our residents feel like they're in control of their own destiny and that the city government is there for them as an excited and supportive partner. I just want to say these last 2 years have been very different than what I would have anticipated. But in many ways, I wouldn't trade a second of it. It's been hard, it's been tough. There are times when I felt despair, but when I come to neighborhoods like this, and I see the vibrancy and the excitement of people in the community who have lived here for decades and have not left, have stood strong in the face of a lot of adversity, I know that our better days are ahead and that I must buckle down even further and make sure that I am living my best life so that I can live that best life for all of you. So I am humbled and thankful and grateful to be the mayor of this amazing city and more work to come. At this time, I'd like to invite Commissioner Cox to come to say a few words.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Windy spring day in Chicago. I'm thrilled. I'm pleased to be here to celebrate what is this new Chicago Works Community Challenge and the announcement, and to celebrate our mayor for 2 years, 2 monumental years of work on behalf of Chicagoans. I think we should all recognize the courage that it has taken to lead this city, and even more importantly, the courage that the mayor has demonstrated to stay true to her commitment to neighborhoods despite all adversities. I just appreciate it, Mayor. I want to thank you. It was so easy to get off track, and instead we doubled down on the work that needs to be done in neighborhoods like Auburn Gresham and across the city, and we've made a particular commitment to the South and West Side. I think the mayor recognizes more than anyone that the very soul of this city resides in our neighborhoods. And that's why we're here, and that's why the investments that we're trying to create are targeted in neighborhoods like the one we're in right now. And it was not just the long-term investments. There was an acknowledgement that we needed to create short-term investments that turn into actions so that people can see change happening right in front of their eyes. This lot is simply waiting for an investment, but it can be cared for in the meantime. And so you can start to see these small signs of care and larger investments to come. We are just a few blocks away from the Metra reinvestment. We are about 200 feet away from the Healthy Hub on 79th Street, and across from that, the investment of Invest Southwest mixed-use development. So these are real, tangible investments that are going to change the quality of life in neighborhoods. But what we also want to do is to begin to plant these community challenges that turn into real places where people gather, people congregate, and you're invited to stay in public space. So that means it might be a vacant lot that could be transformed into a food court for food trucks, or a neighborhood playground. It might be the local library that we go to and you've noticed that it could use a new reading room for young people. We think that some of the best ideas that are out there that will sustain neighborhoods are right there in the community. We have been very intentional to try to attract investment to the very historic cores of our neighborhoods across Chicago. Just last night, we were celebrating 6 development proposals that came to North Lawndale. There were 150 residents on a Zoom call to see those investments. On Monday, the same thing in Bronzeville. 300 residents dialed in to see investments that are coming to their community. So this is really what it's about, but we want to sustain this momentum. We want to give that responsibility and the creative ideas to residents who we are meeting on these calls who have wonderful ideas that can sustain us for many years to come. So whether it's a vacant lot or it's your neighborhood school or it's a community library, this challenge is to bring those best ideas forward, and we will get them done. We'll get them done together. So I just want to thank everyone for staying with us throughout these 2 years, and I feel confident that we will see the fruits of our labor in the next 2 years to come. So thank you again, Mayor, to my fellow commissioners, and most importantly, to the residents who have stayed with us throughout this period. And with that, I'd like to invite our treasurer, Melissa Carners-Irving, to the stand.
Good afternoon. I see this microphone was for the mayor, so hopefully you all can hear me with my height. And this wind, I did not know would be this brutal, so I would try to conceal my assets with this dress that I have on. But I always begin by saying that I am so humble yet proud to be the city treasurer of Chicago. And certainly as Chicago treasurer, I too embark as Mayor Lori Lightfoot on this 2 years of being in office. And during that time, I certainly have been aware of the importance of being intentional and providing opportunities to our disadvantaged communities. As the only elected official that sits on all 4 of the city's pension funds, I can truly count on one hand how often I see financial asset managers that look like me. And I make it my business to provide opportunities to Black and brown people because I know that if I don't, who will? You may have seen the Treasurer's Office in our partnership with Operation Hope, where we try to give residents of Chicago, especially in disadvantaged communities, an advantage by increasing their credit score to over 700, with the hope that maybe they can buy a home or buy a car. And let's be frank, many banks have been able to provide an excuse to not lend to Black and brown communities because of their credit scores. We know that Black and brown residents, because of many reasons, including low-wage jobs and lack of opportunities, tend to be the ones with lower credit scores. So inadvertently, they are excluded from lending. Certainly, we are working to change that, and I thank the mayor with her partnership on that. As a native Chicagoan, as a young woman of color, who was born in Inglewood, raised on the West Side, I feel compelled to stand for those that have not had a voice, as the mayor has just stated. So when I stand here today with Mayor Lightfoot, I am happy to see these investments in the community on the mayor's 2nd year anniversary and her being intentional about investing in communities of color, especially Black and brown communities. I was thinking as I was coming here today, the mayor could have been anywhere on her 2nd year anniversary, but she is right here on 79th Street in Auburn Gresham, speaking about investments in the community. Now, I would be remiss if I did not say this. I know that there have been a lot of emotions the last couple of days around the mayor's decision to be inclusive of Black and brown journalists. But if we could all just take a step back and relax a bit. Just think, the first Black woman, openly gay mayor. If not her, then who? To make a stand. Ida B. Wells, groundbreaking Black journalist, activist, and co-founder of NAACP, said something over 100 years today that is still applicable. The way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them. Is City Hall journalism the only industry that lacks diversity? Of course not. There are many industries, including the financial service industry, that we can't even begin to name. But it's programs like this today and decisions that the mayor has made that are examples of how people of color that are afforded opportunities to open doors, such as being mayor, such as being treasurer, must take the opportunity to help and be intentional about it. Because if we don't, then change will not occur. Now, as I close, I will say, and this is such a passionate statement for me, and so I just have to sometimes control my emotions because this is so important to me about diversity, equity, and inclusion. If I sat in my pension fund meetings and said, oh well, there is limited Black and brown asset managers, so I have to accept what is provided to me, will we ever see change? Will we ever be able to see people that look like us in these rooms, making these decisions? And so I close by saying, it is up to us to change the status quo. And it is certainly up to the mayor to challenge when she sees despair, disparity, and inequity. And so in closing, happy 2nd year anniversary to Mayor Lori Lightfoot. And we thank you for making tough decisions that, while may not always be popular, are necessary. Thank you. And next, we will hear from Megan Hart, whom I have known for a very long time, Executive Director of Local Initiative Support Corporation. I have to say that because I always just say LISC. Correct. Megan Hart.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I think this is literally the first time I've been outside of my kitchen in a very, very long time. So I'm welcome that the world is opening back up. And to be here in one of the communities that we work in. I think what's really important about today are a couple things. LISC has for about 20-25 years been working in communities and identifying opportunities with community partners and through community partners for investments to happen in communities through quality of life plans. But the way that that has happened in the past is the community makes the plan and then they go and try and identify the resources. And what's different about what the mayor is doing here and what Invest Southwest is that the community is at the table in identifying and prioritizing where capital dollars are spent. We work in 20 different communities across the city, and we have come together as the One Chicago for All. And I want to give kudos to Mayor Lightfoot, and Treasurer Conyers-Ervin, because they've invited community to the table to talk about where investments should happen. And now we're taking the next step of having the community recommend and send investment from the city resources to specific projects that they have. So one important thing about this lot, and I really want to give a shout out to our partners here today, Greater Auburn Gresham Development Corporation, specifically Norma Sanders, you guys are all back there, but they're a community partner. but they really are part of Auburn Gresham's collective in creating a quality of life and making sure that quality of life happens in communities. So this lot has been serviced by Greater Auburn Gresham Development Corporation for years. At Christmas, it's a Christmas lot. In other times of the years, it's something else. And about 3 or 4 years ago, when I started at LISC, in talking with Norma and Carlos and the team, they said, if you really want to make a difference, come out and do a service day with us. So a couple blocks to the east, there's another lot that was overrun with weeds and trash. And so we came out and worked with the community to clean that lot. Every day, organizations like Greater Auburn Gresham Development Corporation are doing all of those things to improve community, from the smallest to driving big investments like the Healthy Lifestyles building. And so I think it's important of why we're at this lot, because now the invitation is not that the city is coming to say, this is a city-owned lot, and here's what we're gonna do here. It's, you're invited to come tell us what should happen here. And there's resources tied to that. So I don't have a whole lot more to say, except that that happens across a number of communities in the city, and now there's an opportunity to be at the table in those decisions. And whether it's schools, parks, vacant lots, those are physical assets, but all of those assets are used and created and benefited by having people from the community in them. So to invite them into making a decision is a huge step forward. It hasn't happened before. This lot, the community has been bugging the city for administrations to get some investment. And so not to put them up on a priority, but I'm just saying this would be a great place to make an investment with this funds. So thank you for that. Thank you, Mayor Lightfoot. Thank you, Treasurer Conyers-Irvin. Shout out to Alderman Moore, who's assigned right now, but he is a mover and shaker and makes things happen in this community as well. Thank you.
And I should have acknowledged Alderman Moore, who sends his regrets. He's off doing a little campaigning downstate, but we are grateful to be here, and I know that he wishes he was here with us as well. With that, I'm happy to take questions. Go ahead, Craig. Can you just speak up? I think she's going to give you.
I have a mic right here.
Okay. Go ahead.
You're touting a lot of accomplishments, but there are a lot of other groups that are giving you failing grades today. 40 groups going to be marching up in Logan Square, FOP, vote of no confidence. How do you justify all your successes or your claims to success when many people out in the community are saying you're not listening to them?
Well, it's not about justifying the success. We cataloged, I think, over 150 different things that we've accomplished in 2 short years. Those are real. You'll check them, as I'm sure you will. Obviously, we haven't done everything that we want to do or plan to do. There's this thing called a global pandemic that obviously has slowed things down, but we stay determined. And look, I'm the mayor of the city. There's always going to be people who are critical. There's always going to be people who say we've fallen short. And you mentioned the FOP. Let's talk a little bit about that. Hold on one second. We are on the cusp of 4 years since the FOP contract expired. 4 years. And let me tell you a little bit about what has happened with this current FOP administration. They are refusing to come to the table and bargain, ladies and gentlemen. Refusing. We walked into office with so many contracts that were open. We've resolved every single one except the FOP. 4 years on, and their members are not getting any kind of wage increase. They haven't gotten a wage increase in 4 years. And why? Because the current administration of the FOP has decided that the best strategy is to do nothing. Why? Because they don't want to face the realities that we are in. We got monumental reforms and accountability in the supervisors' contracts. The state law has changed to make sure that there's more reform and accountability. But what does the FOP president say? He says that his strategy is to delay, to do nothing, to drag it out, so that he doesn't have to face the reality. But meanwhile, His members are losing literally tens of thousands of dollars every year in back pay that they are entitled to that they haven't gotten because the FOP has done nothing. So frankly, getting a vote of no confidence from that guy is a badge of honor. Accepted. So as I said, there's always going to be critics. That goes with the territory. But what I'm focused on is making sure that every day I'm working my tail off for the residents of this city, and my commitment and my resolve has never dimmed. And we're excited to start year 3 tomorrow.
We can follow up on the decision to grant Black and brown journalists the one-on-ones on your 2-year anniversary. For those of us who've covered you on the beat since the beginning of your campaign, are you implying that white reporters cannot do a fair job of covering you?
It has nothing to do about you, Craig, with due respect, or anybody else. What it has to do about is the facts. And the facts is that when I look out at across this podium, as I'm doing now, I don't see much in the way of diversity. The fact that the City Hall press corps is overwhelmingly white, has very little in the way of diversity, is an embarrassment. We are a city that is almost 3/4 people of color. I believe that the City Hall press corps needs to reflect the diversity of our city. And I saw some of the commentary, which frankly was insulting, to suggest that journalists of color won't ask the tough questions. Really? To suggest that somehow I'm saying certain journalists are racist? Really? No, the facts are the facts. And the fact is that this press corps does not reflect the diversity of the city, and it makes a difference in the kinds of coverage. Everybody, me, you, everybody, brings our life experiences to the way that we perceive events. All of us bring an implicit bias. And what I'm saying is, it's way past time. It's way past time for the City Hall press corps and the people that do the hiring and make the decisions to get the memo. We are in a time where we're having a powerful and important conversation around systemic racism in every institution. And the press and the media can't be exempt from that conversation. So one day out of 365, I say that I'm going to mark the anniversary of my 2 years in office by giving exclusive one-on-ones to journalists of color, and the world loses its mind. How about we focus on doing what is necessary to step up, make different and better hiring decisions to diversify the ranks of the Chicago press corps?
Mayor, you mentioned today that one of your goals was to make the city the safest big city. However, shootings and murders are up, carjackings are up, violent crime is up. How is the city and how is this particular neighborhood better off today than it was 2 years ago?
Well, let me give a little context. We ended 2019 with under 500 homicides for the first time in years, and then COVID struck. And I think if you look and follow your history, what you're going to find is every major city across the country, New York, LA, St. Louis, Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Denver, every single city across the country has faced a skyrocketing increase in violent crime. Part of this is obviously due to COVID, because every part of our public safety infrastructure has been directly and dramatically affected by COVID-19. Now, no one's satisfied with that, and we're working hard, but a couple data points that you guys need to take notice of, and I hope cover. Over the course of this year in particular, our homicide clearance rate has hovered at about 60%. 60%. It wasn't that long ago, and certainly when I wasn't mayor, that the homicide clearance rate was in the teens. How did we go from low teens to 60%? We've done that because of a lot of hard work on the part of our detectives, a lot of hard work and being much more collaborative and using technology like cameras in our ATC rooms to really be more focused and determined on solving homicides. But we've also done it because the people have understood, and we've built stronger, better relationships with people in the community. You can't go from low teens to right around 60% without people cooperating, without people saying, I'm fed up with what's happening and I'm going to report the people in my neighborhood who are causing harm. Obviously, a lot more work to be done. I'm not satisfied. But when we see a problem, we focus on it. You mentioned carjackings. We had a spike in carjackings. We organize and form task forces and work with local partners, but also federal partners, and we've seen a dramatic decrease in the amount of carjackings. Part of what was going on, it was driven by teenagers who weren't in school. So I think that the part of the cause and effect is opening up opportunities for in-person learning, but also focusing like a laser beam on these issues that we're seeing. Are we happy where we are? No. Are we going to be satisfied? But are we determined and committed and making the adjustments that are necessary to respond to the violent crime? Last thing that I'll say, though, is we will always be fighting a losing battle when it comes to gun violence if we don't get help from the federal government. When you can go to Indiana and buy literally military-grade weapons at any quantity that you want, if you've got the resources to buy them, and then they show up where? In communities like Auburn, Gresham, here on the south side. In Austin, the 11th district is constantly plagued with gunfire. Those guns are purchased in Chicago. They're purchased in suburban gun stores in Indiana, which is why we filed suit against an Indiana gun shop that repeatedly sold guns that ended up in illegal activity here in Chicago. But what we need is the federal government, who's uniquely qualified to address these issues, to step up and be more of a partner than what we've seen over these last 4 years. Working together, we can address these issues, but there's clearly more work to be done.
Mayor, you know, often it's perception is reality. And there's a perception that Chicago is having a hard time coming back from the pandemic. Other big cities like New York are seeing workers back in the office. We're not seeing that yet.
Well, I don't know.
Can I finish, please?
Yeah, please, go ahead.
There are talks also on replacing perhaps Macy's and other kinds of businesses that have been shut down, not just the Mag Mile. That, of course, is one of the city's jewels. So what about that perception that Chicago's struggling on the rebound?
So I don't know where you're getting that, but here's what I know. Over the course of this year, we've had over 31 corporate relocations to Chicago, 5 in the last 5 weeks. That's a record of accomplishment. And these are companies that could literally choose to be anywhere in the world, but they're choosing Chicago. Why are they choosing Chicago? Because of the overall strength of our economy. They're choosing Chicago because we've got a great, talented, and diverse workforce. They're choosing Chicago because of our superior transportation systems. So the numbers that I look at, coming from the Federal Reserve and others, tell me that Chicago's got the lowest unemployment rate of any big city in the country. So the numbers tell a very different story than what you're saying, but I think the perception is, from what I hear from business leaders all across the city, that they're enthusiastic, that they're excited, that they're welcoming their workers back. So that's what I'm seeing, is a hunger and a desire to make sure that our economy, as we're recovering, roars back. And these indicators of corporate relocations, we didn't lose any major corporations, which is not something that other cities can see. Those are the numbers that I'm looking at, and I think those data points argue well for the city of Chicago. Hi, Heather.
Hi, Mayor. I have one question and then a follow-up.
Sure.
Will you introduce tomorrow at the Public Safety Committee a proposal to put an elected board in charge of the Chicago Police Department?
So we will meet the deadline that the clerk's office set on Monday. And we're in active conversations with a number of the members of the Public Safety Committee and others who are interested. So that plan is a work in progress, but we'll meet the deadline for Monday's filing at the clerk's office.
You campaigned for mayor on a platform that promised a fully elected school board, as well as the proposal for civilian oversight of the police board introduced by GAPA. You no longer support either of those proposals. What do you say to people who voted for you based on those issues?
Well, here's what I would say is this. Regarding the civilian oversight, I do support civilian oversight. Unfortunately, the GAPA folks took a long time to figure out and still didn't solve a couple of key issues. And even in the consolidated ordinance, there's still significant gaps that have not been filled. So I think that that's important. What you'll see in the proposal that we put forward is really kind of taking the best of both GAPA and CPAC in trying to move that forward. Regarding the elected school board issue, I support a hybrid, and that hybrid obviously would have an elected component to it. But I think here's what we need to make sure that we keep in mind when we're talking about one of the most consequential changes in governance of CPS. First and foremost, you have to ask, does this proposal help our kids? Does this proposal make sure that the learning gaps that we're seeing, the loss of learning that we've seen over the course of the pandemic, does that proposal help that? Does the proposal make sure that parents have an opportunity to be at the table, all parents, not just citizens, but also undocumented parents? Does the proposal allow for the creation of a plan that can be executed over multiple years? When I sit down and I have analyzed the current prevailing proposal and talk to the authors about these key questions around equity and making sure that our kids are first, that our parents have a seat at the table. And by the way, that proposal doesn't account for the fact that the city of Chicago every year subsidizes CPS to the tune of $500 million. That part of that is pensions for non-CTU, but another $150 million in programming. When we ask, well, where's the money going to come from to make sure that CPS is still fully funded? The answer, we'll get back to you. Well, we don't have time for folks to get back to us. What we need is a plan that is going to speak our values and make sure that no one is disenfranchised and that it puts our children first, which is why I support a hybrid plan.
All right, Mayor Lightfoot, Amy Jacobson.
Good to see you, Amy.
Yeah, good afternoon. 2 questions I have for you. And I brought this up the other day too, but we need some sensible adjustments when it comes to CPS capacity limits, because right now what's hurting the black and brown community is that we can't watch our kids graduate because there's a capacity limit outdoors of 100. And Governor Pritzker says you can have at least 500 people outside. I feel like the right hand's not talking to the left hand. Is there any way you can help parents so that they can watch their kids graduate and we can have 1 graduation instead of 5 graduations?
Yeah, we are working on that to make sure that we're compliant with IDPH and CDPH rules. And there are graduations that will be taking place with parents in tow. So we're working through those issues now.
Yeah, those are selective enrollment schools that paid $18,000 to go to Soldier Field.
No, they're not just going to be selective enrollment schools.
Okay, my second question. A lot of us reporters that are here, we worked so hard to get back to Chicago. We sacrificed more than I think people will ever know. And so why? No, it's, well, all right, I'm just asking, what do you suggest that we do?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
I mean, what, because you want more black and brown reporters, and I understand that, but what do you suggest that we do?
I don't think this is a question for you. I think it's for the people that make the hiring decisions to diversify the ranks of the Chicago Press Corps. We know every single year that there are very talented people of color that are graduating from journalism schools. It's not that difficult. What you got to do is be intentional. You got to want it. You got to be intentional. You have to have a plan, and then you got to execute and implement that plan. I know that from my own experiences serving on my firms and leading my firm's diversity and inclusion committee. You can't ever rest, but you've got to be committed, and you've got to turn that commitment into real, concrete action. It's 2021. The notion that there's not enough talent in the city is nonsense. The notion that reporters of color aren't going to ask tough questions, nonsense. What we need is to stop making excuses and get to work and get it done. And I'm willing to do what I can to be helpful, but I don't make the hiring decisions in the newsrooms. But I think my responsibility as mayor, and really Treasurer Conyers Irvin said it very, very eloquently. If not us, who? If we don't call this out, no one will. So we took advantage of the opportunity of the 2-year anniversary to call this out, and hopefully there will be some progress. I think there's been a lot of interesting conversations that have unfolded over the last day or so. I think a number of journalists of color are banding together and forming some plans to take some action to make sure that this isn't just a momentary conversation, but there are going to be concrete steps and actions that follow. Yes, sir.
Mayor, you know, people see you on TV what do you say to the people in the community? I'm not talking about the activists or the preachers. I'm talking about ordinary people. They want to see more of you in the community. When do you plan on having a real town hall meeting with people in the community? You
Sir,
say you want to stop the violence.
Sir, I am out in the community every week, multiple times a week. So you're happy to follow along with us, but I'm always, even through the pandemic, I have been out in community consistently all over the city, and particularly on the south and the west side. And what I continually hear from folks when I'm out is, Mayor, I've never met a mayor before. I've never seen a mayor in my community. So I'm out and about, happy to have you tag along with us, but I'm out in the community. If you look at our social media feed, if you look at the conversations that I'm having on a daily basis, I'm all over the city, have been from day one, never gonna stop, because that's what I think is important. It's important, one, because I think people wanna see the mayor of the city that is governing. I think it's also important for me personally to be able to look people in the eye and understand from their perspective what is going on, what they need in their community. So I've never stopped, and I'm not going to. Yes, sir.
Hey, Mayor. Nate Rogers here, Fox 32. Quick question, two-part question. Where are we on police reform? Specifically, we've talked about diversity in the media, but I'll tell you just a short story. A couple of weeks ago, I live in East Garfield Park, and I was just running, jogging in the neighborhood, and a squad car pulled up beside of me, and they said, hey, what are you doing? Where are you going? I said, I'm just jogging. And they said, what are you up to? I said, sir, I'm just jogging. No issues, no problems. I think I was probably even running on the street, so not blocking any traffic. But when I told the officer I was a reporter for Fox 32, literally, they left me alone. At the end of the day, I think there's still a lot of black and brown people in this city who are just trying to live their normal lives, but we're still dealing with this issue of racial profiling, even amid police-involved shootings. Where are we, Mayor Lightfoot, on actual reform when it comes to your department as well as the police department?
I think we have made significant strides over the last 2 years, but no one's going to say that we've reached the destination. Let me give you a couple of data points. In 2016, when I led the Police Accountability Task Force, at that time, other than firearms qualification, there was no annual regular training for police officers. 0 hours devoted other than firearms training. Now, there's 40 hours. And those 40 hours include things like use of force, de-escalation, procedural justice, implicit bias, and on and on. That's significant progress. As I said, we are working our tails off to comply with the various terms of the consent decree. We've reformed police car pursuits. We're in the process, and we'll be announcing shortly, reforms of the foot pursuit policy. We reformed search warrants. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and that work is ongoing. But I'd love for you to sit with the superintendent, to sit with the PIO over there, to really do a deep dive. But there's a lot of good things that are actually happening around police reform. Do we need to do more? Of course we do. And that journey is going to continue for years to come, because there has to be a continual training and work. And if somebody you believe racially profiled you, I'd encourage you, sir, to file a complaint. File a complaint. Call COPA. Call the BIA, because obviously that's unacceptable. We need to make sure that this department, every single officer, understands that constitutional policing is the rule of the day, and those that don't need to get out.
Thank you, Mayor. Last question. In terms of amid the Chicago Works Challenge today, what about the Morgan All-Star Youth Center? I'm asking this question from a brother over here. I think there are other community groups that have apparently done the necessary paperwork. Are you familiar with this group, the Morgan All-Star Youth Center? Do you support that at all? That's the question.
I'm not familiar with it, but I would say that with this Chicago Works Community Challenge, they and others across the city should file. Thank you. Thank you.
Mayor, if I may.
Go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon. Patrick Elwood from WGN TV.
Go ahead. There you go.
As we reported last night, the automated train line at O'Hare has been offline for expansion and renovation since 2018.
These young people are dirty.
Budgeted has gone towards shuttle buses. There's no end in sight for the project. What are your thoughts in and of on that? And then as we eye an $8 billion expansion, why should Chicago taxpayers be confident that job's going to be on time and on budget?
So part of the challenge with that job, obviously we've had some contractor issues which we have worked to address, but one of the big linchpins over last year was the key part to get the equipment back and running was in Canada. And the border was closed, and we couldn't get the part back here in Chicago. We can certainly get you an update on what the status of that project is, but the border being closed was a significant problem for that project and why it went offline. I think the rest of the planning and the project is on track, and I feel very good about where we are. Commissioner Jamie Rhee is a phenomenal commissioner. She's on top of her business out at O'Hare, and so I feel very confident about her leadership. Yeah, and that's what I'm responding to. Obviously, we've had to make some adjustments because of the impact that the airlines have had, and obviously they were funding a significant part of that expansion. But I feel like we're back on track. We've had great conversations with our airline partners. But importantly, I think what your question implies is there a sufficient due diligence there to make sure that the things are going to stay on track and the contractors are going to be held accountable? And I believe that with the controls that have been put in place, we're going to go forward in a good way. Thank you. Thanks.